We're live. Woohoo! Welcome
All
to
right.
this week's roundtable with our life design coaches. And we're live streaming again. We're also rookies at live streaming, so it might be a little bit clunky. But here we go. So if you don't join us during the live stream, feel free to leave comments once the regular videos, published on. Today's topic is very interesting, near-death experiences, or NDEs as it's called. And we mentioned that this was kind of a topic starting in the 60s and 70s. And it's now, some of the research that I'll share in the comments below in the show notes, doctors, John Hopkins, the publishing reports on the data they're accumulating from patients that have near-death experiences. So it's not an unusual topic today, but it was really out there on the edge for a couple of decades. Okay, so we start with slides, and let's see what I can do. We're going to share screen. We're going to go to my slides, share. Okay, can you guys see that?
No.
Oh, that's right. I have this extra step. We have to let it come onto the stage. Okay. What I'm supposed to call it something. Wait a minute. Add to stage. Okay. Now can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for your patience. Now I have to go find it. There it is. It turns into a little blue box in the tab once it's in StreamYard, and I'm learning. I had no idea how to come up with an image for a near-death experience, so I have two rough attempts here, this one and this one. So to kind of set the topic, in the clips that we're going to share in a little while, near-death experiences are often told after some kind of accident, car accident or a plane accident, job place accident, a surgery in wartime, other kinds of emergencies or natural disasters. So you have a period of time where you've been injured and kind of walk through death and walk back, I guess, is a near-death experience in the way we're using it. Okay, we have a couple of memes. 3. Okay, this first one here says, I have a feeling that my guardian angel sometimes looks at me like this, hands over face. And then, not all angels are in heaven. Me, for example, I'm at work. And then this last one, dressed as the agent of death here. Are you on your way to a Halloween party too? Actually, neither of us are. No, we're not doing that. Okay. So, okay. So as a live stream, before we go into our topic discussion, I have a few clips to share. And Brian and I practiced a little before, but here we go. We're going to share some clips where real people talk about what their experience it was. And here at Alive Design, we invite people to just consider, and explore. We don't say you have to believe this or you have to believe that. You need some help in figuring out the best way to live your life. And we're here to support whatever that looks like for you. So, but here's 5 real stories, and we'll share these clips from YouTube. Share screen. And here's one. Share. And I have to put it on the stage. Hang on. There we go. Add to stage. And then I get to turn it on.
The anesthesia. I said no. He wheeled me into the operating room, where immediately I transitioned seamlessly to floating above the scene. I watched my body turn blue, then I watched my own flatline. I was then shown a movie-like review of my life, where I witnessed my entire life from start to finish from a third-person perspective. I got to see how I treated the people that I cared about and how I treated myself. As the movie of my life ended, I couldn't help but feel angry at myself. In that moment, all I wanted was a second chance. After a while, it settled in that my life was actually over, so I had no choice but to let it go and move on. I was then transitioned into a spiritual type realm, where time didn't exist. In fact, time and I were the same thing. Everything and I were the same thing. I was viewing the outside world from the perspective of the inside of a diamond. There were refracted combinations of light that formed one universal color. The place I was in was perfect. I was made whole again.
That's kind of in a nutshell.
Ah, she just disappeared.
Bye, Mom. See ya.
Okay. What does that mean?
It's a sign.
I don't know. Do you guys want to jump into the discussion? I guess we're still live. It says we're still live.
Is there a way we can see if anyone is watching?
I don't know. I'm not sure how to do that.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah. Why don't we?
I am watching you. I am watching you, then.
Great.
Yes. We've got at least 3 people. We've got 3 people watching.
Why don't we just assume nobody that Myrna's not coming back?
Okay.
Go for it.
So let me jump into this. I think this is an amazing topic. Absolutely amazing. I think every human being should study this at least a little bit, because in my opinion, we have testimony of what happens after death. So that's extremely important to know about. I mean, we're all going to die. So this is like, and people have incredible experiences. Looks like my mom's back here.
I kicked myself out. Go ahead.
Okay, so we're just going into the discussion now. All right, cool. So, and I would also say, some people, maybe more scientifically minded people, might claim, oh, it's just a hallucination. What I can tell you is pretty much every single person who has had a near-death experience will tell you, no, I died. There was not a hallucination. Like, my soul left my body. I saw my dead body there. Like, I met beings on the other side, spiritual beings. Like, so I'm going to definitely suggest that people who have these experiences actually died, and this is their testimony of life on the other side. I don't think the explanation that it's merely a hallucination is satisfactory, especially because oftentimes these people are brain dead. They have no pulse. Well, if there's no activity in your brain, how is it a hallucination? The brain would have to have activity to produce a hallucination, right? So I'm just going to say these people died. They saw the afterlife, and they have various testimonies about it. And I think that's super amazing. So let's talk about some themes of them, because I've watched a bunch of these videos, and I think they're just amazing. And there's a lot of themes. One theme is meeting loved ones who have passed on, meeting spiritual beings, like maybe angels, or maybe meeting God, or maybe meeting Jesus, or meeting spirit guides. There's a whole variety of experiences people have. Sometimes people have an experience of just light, and the light is speaking to them. So this can happen in a whole bunch of different ways. One theme is telepathy. So many people who have these near-death experiences, which I would actually call death experiences. That's what they actually are, in my opinion. They say that when you're in the afterlife, telepathy is like pretty natural. Many of them say you just communicate telepathically. Like, you just know, there's an instant knowing of what God is saying to you, or of what this angel is saying to you, or of what your loved ones who have just been deceased are saying to you. You just feel it. You just know what they're saying. And the instant you want to communicate to them, they just feel it, and they just know what you're saying to them. And it just goes back and forth instantaneously like that. Telepathy is a theme. Interestingly, spherical vision is a theme. meaning being able to see 360 degrees around. So behind you, to the sides, in front of you, you're just seeing in all directions at once. And also just enhanced vision of any kind. Some people have said they can like zoom in when they look at things or zoom out. You have like, many people have said they have a much greater enhanced version of vision. Tons of people talk about an overwhelming feeling of love. Like almost to the point you can't take it. Like you feel like you're going to explode. Like you can't handle it all. Or peace or these things. And also some people have very Christian oriented experiences. Some people have experienced hell or visions of hell, being toured through hell. Some people have experienced heavenly realms where they talk with Jesus or with angels or with that stuff. So sometimes the experiences are negative if someone has like a hell, near-death experience. But there's a whole variety. They're not all like that. Another theme is a lot of people are shown a lot of stuff, but they're told if you go past this point, you can't come back. Like if you go over here, you're not going back to Earth. You're over there now. I've heard that in a lot of them. Another theme is most people don't want to come back to Earth once they experience these higher realms. Pretty much everyone says, no, I'll just stay here. And usually the people who come back were told, no, you have to go back. You have more time you have things you have to do. So I remember one I saw, and I'll try not to go on for too long, but there's just a lot to this topic. I remember one I saw with this woman, and she was like, had a super tough life. She was sexually abused from an early age. She got hooked on drugs. She became a prostitute. She was selling drugs, all this stuff. And she like overdosed. So she died. She had this, near-death experience. And, she met angels. They were talking to her, guiding her through. And then they said, you have to go back. And she's like, no, I'm not going back down there. No. And they were like, well, if you don't go back, you could die and you could live some of these other lives. And they showed her the possibilities of other lives she could live. And they were all worse. They were all worse than what she had been through in this life. And she was like, well, those are all worse. And they were like, yeah, you're supposed to finish your life. If you want to leave now, it gets worse. Like you're supposed to complete your life. And she was like, okay, fuck it, send me back. And so she went back, and she actually did very well. She ended up getting over her addiction. She was like praying and connecting to God, and she had this experience where she felt part of her brain get healed that was so addicted to whatever she was on. I think she was on opiates. And now she helps people recover from addiction. So she's one of these stories of like, your test becomes your testimony, your mess becomes your message. Like she's helping people out of the problem she used to be in. So yeah, and I mean, it's amazing. So I'll tell you another one I saw. This was a Christian one. This guy was a pastor or a minister of some kind, and he died. And I have a funny bit I'm gonna do about this, although this is a super sacred, like reverential thing. But he died, so he saw Jesus on the other side, and he was asking Jesus questions about how he was created, like as a soul. And Jesus said, before you were made, I looked through the corridors of time. I saw all the millions and billions of possibilities of your soul, everything terrible and wonderful that you might do. And overall, it was good. And then you were made. That's crazy. Imagine you die, you meet Jesus, and he says that to you. That I don't even know. So yeah, and then in that one, he asked Jesus more questions, and Jesus said, "Before the universe was, I am." So the funny bit I'm going to do about this is imagine Jerry Seinfeld does a bit about near-death experiences, okay? And he's like, so what's the deal with these near-death experiences? You die, you meet Jesus, all of a sudden he tells you, before you were made, I looked through the corridors of time, and I saw all the millions and billions of possibilities of your soul. Overall, it was good. And then you were made. I mean, what do you say to that? You can't say anything. There's literally nothing you can say to that. What do you say? Great job. I owe you one. So I think it's, but really, what would you say to that? What if you had this kind of experience? And whether it was with Jesus or God or with angels, I mean, these are really profound experiences that people have. So, yeah, why don't I stop talking for a bit and give someone else a chance? I've gone on for a while here. Someone else wants to jump in.
I was thinking Dean might want to share something about the Dr. Raymond Moody work that he has read. He's the person who coined the term near-death experience, or NDEs.
Yeah, so
chime in, Dean?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just saying before we started that I've read a lot of Dr. Moody's work, and beginning with Life After Life, which came out probably in 77 or 78. That's just my guess. It could be, that could be totally wrong. But, what's very interesting in that book is that he spends a substantial part of that book countering materialist arguments. So the argument, everyone agrees that NDEs happen, right? That's something that people refer to as a near-death experience. People do experience those things. So the typical skeptic argument goes something like, as your body is dying, your brain releases lots of chemicals, DMT, whatever it is, and you basically hallucinate your way out. And those arguments have been examined very closely, and Dr. Moody in the first book, I think, examines those in detail, and lots of people have examined them since. And I unfortunately can't reproduce off the top of my head the rebuttals to all those, but I do know that they're out there. And I also know that, like in terms of what we might think of as kind of what used to be a fringe or almost paranormal sort of topic, now is NDEs are totally mainstream phenomenon. So there is the Institute for the Scientific Study of Near-Death Experiences. They have their own academic journal or journal. The man who is the head of the Institute recently, in the last 3 months, has appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast and on the Theo Vaughn podcast, talking at great length about this. And I know and I did watch big chunks of both of those, and I know that he addresses the arguments against the idea that these experiences reflect something real that occurs somewhere outside of merely the brain, right? So the question is, are NDEs a product of just the physical decomposition and shutting down of the brain, or do these reports reflect an actual experience that goes somehow beyond your brain, right? And I know that in both of those podcasts, so if people are interested, those could easily be found online, and
we'll share them in the research notes. I'll find them and we'll share.
They can hear the arguments against kind of the materialist position. The other thing we might say is that for a lot of the establishment, and this may be shifting as we go through a massive cultural change, but certainly for the last 40 years, what's been happening is that people who take a sort of a skeptical stance toward these, really, they like to say that they're looking at the evidence and blah, blah, blah. But really what it is that they have an a priori commitment to a materialist paradigm, which they bring into all areas of life. When they encounter something like near-death experiences, they say, whatever this is, it has to fit with my a priority, my prior philosophical commitments, because there's no way my prior philosophical commitments could be wrong. So whatever, since I'm 100% certain that my philosophical commitments cannot err, then whatever the evidence is must be interpreted in such a way that it aligns with my prior philosophical commitments. But I think probably we are in such a time of cultural change that a lot of that materialism and etc. And I suppose atheism in a way, though that's a little bit outside of what I'm talking about, but materialism, it seems to me when I hear those arguments now, they don't just seem false, they seem so dated. Like nobody really thinks that anymore, except for a few dinosaurs who are hanging around. So Dr. Moody started this research, published. He did. I know that the first book on near-death experiences was actually published in the 19th century. I can't recall the title of it off the top of my head, but really modern near-death experience studies, I think, started with Raymond Moody in the 60s. And so just in terms of, I'll say one more thing about that. The research on these is so extensive. You could devote your whole life to this, right? Even in the last few years, there's multiple books came out. I mean, the reason that the guy from the Institute was on the Joe Rogan show right now was that he just published another book. I know a few years ago, a guy whose name I think was Scott Kerr, he was a cardiologist who gave up being a cardiologist to become a hospice care palliative medicine doctor, which he makes a point in the introduction that this being a palliative medicine doctor in a hospice pays a lot less than being a cardiologist. But he did this because he was interested in the kind of the exit process for human beings. Mm-hmm. And his book is not on near-death experiences, but he did a study, and he tried to make it as rigorous as he could. I mean, he's a doctor who, kind of understands medical research, and he had access to a large sample of dying people. And so he did a long-term study to look at not near-death experiences, but deathbed visions in which people report visitation from either a loved one who's died or sometimes from angels or maybe religious figures. And he found that this is normative in about 80% of people's dying process. Mm-hmm. Is that they have that what we in fact been told for hundreds of years. I mean, going back to the Enlightenment or whatever, what we've been told is sort of the abnormal anomaly is actually normative experience for the human person to have deathbed visions. And I know there was another book probably out in 4 or 5 years ago on a slightly different topic, but related to near-death experiences, which is, and Dr. Moody talks about some of these in some of his later books, not exclusive, like doesn't devote the whole book to it, but I know there is at least one book devoted to it, what's called a shared death experience. It's where a dying person will be in the room with let's say this, an imminently dying person will be in the room with a person whose death is not imminent. So at the moment where the dying person dies, and the person who is not imminently dying will either see into whatever realm the dying person has gone into, or will temporarily go into this other reality with the dying person, and then return without having suffered an injury or experiencing brain death or whatever it is that we define as death. And so this again, I think, confounds a lot of the materialist arguments about, well, how would you, okay, so if it's just the dying brain shooting lots of loads of DMT into you or whatever, how does that translate to the other person who also saw this, whose brain is in a normal functioning state? So that's just like a overview of my understanding of a big broad overview of my understanding of the research and kind of the philosophical issues. I think in terms of like coaching kind of things, I think it's relevant because metaphysical issues and what we think is going on behind our day-to-day observable reality actually matter a lot in terms of how people live and how people make decisions and how people interpret their experiences. And so one of the things I've often, and I've written about this on Twitter and other places, is that we live in an anti-metaphysical culture that encourages people to not reflect on that or to act like, well, we couldn't possibly know anything, right? There is no source of information about what underlying metaphysical realities are, even though, of course, up until the 18th century, we had, thousands of years of sources trying to tell us something about metaphysical realities. And I think a kind of materialistic, anti-metaphysical culture that tries to tell us that religious questions, spiritual questions are irrelevant to us. It just sets people up for such suffering because it's as if half or more of your vision is gone, right? So we have let's say we have it renders people 90% blind, and then they fall into ditch after ditch after ditch, and they say, well, what's wrong? And then what happens, everyone says, well, I guess it must be normal to live in a ditch.
Right.
And so I mean, this is not the place probably for theological debate or instruction or anything like that. And there's lots of that to sort through. But the fundamental question of whether you believe that this lived reality, embodied reality, is everything, or if it's not everything, makes such a difference to how people think. And it's the most important kind of question a person can answer, and it's the one we're most encouraged to ignore.
Yeah.
So I've said a lot. I'll stop there, but I can say more later if you want.
Yes, we'll pass this along to you, Jonathan. I have a quick question. I know, Jonathan, you encourage your clients not to fear death, to see it as with the last chapter of life, right? We live and then we die. And so it doesn't need to be feared. But I know hospice nurses, I've commented in the chat, have a lot of stories about their loved ones who sort of visit pre-death. They come in and they find them talking to their already dead husband or already dead wife. Or I didn't share a clip with Elizabeth Taylor. She married famously 7 times or 8 times or something. And she has a clip from like 20 years ago, because she's been gone a while, where she had a near-death experience from a surgery and met her dead husband. Fisher was his last name, the love of her life. And he died in some kind of tragedy. And she said she felt like she was wrapped in liquid mercury. It was so warm. It was so loving. It was so peaceful, so different than her daily life here. And then there's her husband, who she loved dearly and lost. And she's like, I'm never leaving. And he said, I'm sorry, honey, you have to go back. I'll see you soon, but you have to go back. She's like, no, this is way better here. I know, but you have more to do. So she went back. So yeah, someone famous who shared an experience on a talk show, and there was a clip. But Jonathan, is there a conversation you have with coaching clients in your hypnosis about, the world is more than you think it is? Or share with us what your thoughts are.
Definitely. But I would like to start actually with this might not be a popular opinion, okay? But I have to say it.
Yes, you do have to say it. We have to hear it.
Yeah, you have to hear it. Let's say for whoever wants the Epstein files to be released, you should be asking for something better. You should be asking for the dead files. That's the real truth you want to actually know. That is going to serve you. Uh, what I'm saying is, one of the greatest hoaxes, one of the greatest scams ever made by a psychopath, it's the way they describe death. Because it's not what they have sold us. Death, as in my experience and for what I have seen with clients with past lives and stuff, is just a different dimension of life. It's non-physical in nature. It does exist. Like Osho used to say that death is an illusion. I will disagree completely. I will say no. Death is it's an actual thing. It happens, but it's not. It does not mean that life ceases to exist. Life is still there. It's just in a different form, and it's
Mhm.
not you. So your relatives, once you're dead, they're not your relatives anymore.
Mhm.
Everybody becomes your relative. The neighbor dogs becomes your relative.
Mhm.
It- The tree outside of your house becomes your relative. There's no such a thing as, in my experience. You can disagree if you want. That's fine. Um,
Mhm.
now, because when we grow up in a society that everybody thinks about death as a bad thing, I think that is a crime. One of the greatest crimes actually ever against humanity, like literally, because it's, it's horrible. The way they teach us about death, it's it's just not pure nonsense. It's nothing even close to reality as it is. So I will actually refer to near-death experiences, in my experience, for what I have seen, as a out-of-body experience.
Mhm.
Now, have I ever had an out-of-body experience? Yes, I have had many. I have had many, so I know they are real. Um, but that does not mean that you cease to exist. Obviously, if you come back and you're still you as John Smith, that means you are still in the physical form. Therefore, you are back, right?
Mhm.
So I actually believe that near death experiences are just like a taste of an out of body experience. That's
Mhm.
from my experience. That's what I've seen. Um,
Mhm.
and again, I'm not saying that is the only truth, but it definitely is part of it. Um, and yes, also when you are seeing yourself from a outside perspective, you do see everything, including yourself, from an outside perspective. Yes, you see yourself in a three-dimensional. You can still control your being, but it's from an outside perspective. It's actually kind of like a video game when you play on third person. That's pretty much it.
Mhm.
Um, so it's actually interesting. I do believe sometimes it can be hallucinations. If there are drugs involved, I would say hallucination for sure. If there were not drugs involved, let's say an accident, somebody's driving a motorcycle and then they almost died, that is a true story. But
Mhm.
if there was some kind of like ayahuasca, mushrooms, marijuana, you name it, anything in between, I wouldn't go, I wouldn't trust that story. But definitely there are some stories that are truth.
Mhm.
I'm sure there has to be, and
Mhm.
I know they are. So far, that's what I have to say. You can
So
ask
good,
any
so
question.
good. There was someone in my family that had a halfway kind of near death experience. My mom went in for kidney surgery, and they waited to do the surgery until she gave birth to my brother. And so they just kept her in the hospital, sent my brother home, and then did her kidney surgery. And during the kidney surgery, she popped out of her body and she was floating above the bed looking down at everybody doing everything. And she had not had an experience in her life where she wasn't in her body. And so she didn't know what that was about. And but she watched the doctor, she heard the nurses, she confirmed with them later. You remember the part where you said this kidney stone is bigger than a golf ball, but not quite a tennis ball? My goodness. And so they were commenting on the size of the kidney stone that they took out. And they confirmed that that is what we said. We didn't mean anything by it. She's like, no, I'm just reporting to you. It's ginormous. They had it in a jar on her bedside table because it was so remarkable. Here's your souvenir of your kidney surgery. And but yeah, she was floating above. She didn't leave the hospital room. The next thing she knew, she was waking up from the surgery. But even that is enough to have you begin the questioning, right, Dean, Jonathan, Brian? Like, I'm more than just this. I'm more than just what animates this. And if I can leave my body, what else can I do? What else is there if now I know there's this by accident during my kidney surgery? Anybody have comments? Go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, one thing that strikes me that, Brian was talking about themes across NDEs. One thing that strikes me is the most basic theme is that people who have NDEs remain themselves in some way, right? And I'd be interested to hear what like a really knowledgeable Eastern person might say about this. Someone who believes that in the end, the personality is an illusion and that the ultimate source of the ultimate destiny of the human person is to not have a personality, but kind of to exist as pure awareness. Mm-hmm. But in all of these NDEs, you see people who remain a self, right? They retain a personality. So if they're having a talk with Jesus or an angel or whatever, they are a they. Mm-hmm. Now, even when they say, I had a profound sense of the oneness of things, even in saying that, they are asserting their separateness from things, right? Because they're saying, I, this self-enclosed being, had a profound sense of the oneness of things. Mm-hmm. And so I just always find that interesting that all of these NDEs, at least from my perspective at this point, affirm the sort of consistency, the endurance, the endurability, and I think ultimately the goodness of individual personality. And because those don't just evaporate after death, but you retain those things. And so like the sort of the diversity of person, appears to remain even after death. And because otherwise, when you say your mom was floating above the okay, she could see her body, but what is the thing that is floating? Mm-hmm. Well, it's a self, it's a soul, it's something, but it is not just sort of undefined, impersonal awareness or energy. Mm-hmm. It's recognizable as a person who is your mom, mm-hmm. and who retains, apparently, even after death, all of the shaping effects of her earthly life. Mm-hmm. I think that's, to me, in fact, I find that sort of encouraging, and it goes to what I was saying about the importance of asking and answering metaphysical questions. Like, are you important? Is your individual personality a good thing? And I think we have a lot of grounds to say yes.
Mm-hmm. We hear about these life reviews that people have, the good, the bad, everything in between. Mm-hmm. And usually when people explain that, they also say that it is with compassion that the review is happening. It's not a scolding. It's not I'm keeping score and you're behind, friend. You should get busy. It's just, hey, here's what happened. like the movie of your life, and it's all okay. So you learned, you grew, you made mistakes, you did this, you did that, and here we are. So yeah, I think to have a perspective like that is such a huge gift. And we find in some of these stories, whether it's the rehabilitation nurse that hears the surgery story after the fact, or family and friends that share it, you know, that perspective can shift how you choose to live going forward. And so we know you don't have to die first to figure that out. We can help you figure it out right now with coaching. We have a team of coaches that help you say, how could your life improve and be better? We can support you in that. You don't have to die and have a conversation with Jesus and come back and then say, all right, I'll get on the straight and narrow. Or I'm finally going to do the thing I always wanted to do but was afraid to do, whatever that looks like. So, we hear stories of a child that was lost through a miscarriage, and the other children in the family don't know that happened, and they have a near-death experience and say, I didn't know that you lost a son and you named him Timmy. And they're like, how do you know about Timmy? Well, I died on the operating table and met him, and he's fine. He says hello. It's like, wait a minute. How do you know about Timmy? So I think there is more to the world than, as you say, Dean, the experience we have in our physical blinders of being an embodied soul. And it is interesting to try to adopt some of the perspectives of, there's so much sand going through the hourglass of our lives. How much time do we have left? What do we want to do at that time to be happy, fulfilled, whatever that looks like for you? I did have a friend, and I was helping her mom towards her end of life. And she would have daily conversations with her husband, who'd been dead 15 years. And I remember talking with my friend and saying, is she really talking to him? And she said, they're talking just like they used to do when I was in the house growing up. It's him. And they're having the same conversations. Yes, I'm going to have the turkey with mustard. I know you don't like mustard, but it's okay. That's what I'm going to have for lunch. They were just back into their rhythm. And this was maybe 3 months before she died. So he was just making the rounds because she was on her way soon. And they were in conversation again. And she was very confident where she was going because he was telling her, it's going to be fine. I'll be here for you when you come through. And really, mustard on the turkey? Yeah, okay. So, I think it can be comforting to know that everything is good. It's good here. It's good there. Final thoughts, you guys? Brian, how do we get a hold of you?
Okay, let's do final thoughts. Yeah, I don't know. There's so much to talk about here, but you're right. I didn't mention that. The life review is another big common theme of NDEs, where you get like you watch almost on a movie screen, or you see a whole replaying of everything you did in your life. And a lot of times you see all the good you did and all the bad you did, and there's an understanding of like, these things were good, these things were not good. But usually it does come from a compassionate, sort of loving perspective of like, yes, you should do better on those things, but it's understood, it's okay, There's also many stories of like, during the life review, you see what you did, but you also experience it from the other person's perspective.
I've heard that too.
So like, you did something to someone that was good, you feel how they felt, and you see the way they saw it, and vice versa. You do something that was bad to someone, you feel how they felt, you see the way they saw it. And that's kind of like a way to teach you sort of how to live better. So that's a big theme of many of them. Yeah, and I think, Dean, you bring up some good points as far as sort of the understanding of kind of the abandonment of personality in Eastern ideas. And I kind of agree with you. I think maybe that's a misunderstanding. In some of the Eastern traditions, maybe that's, I don't know. the telephone game of religion where, teachings have changed over time. I'm not sure. But I do think you're right. The NDEs show that, you do have sort of a continuous spirit. Another thing I've seen is, like, there's one guy who has a very detailed near-death experience. His name is Vincent Todd Tolman. People can look him up if they want to. And he wrote a book called The Light After Death. And he received like a lot of teachings and a lot of information. He actually was shown what humanity and Earth is going to be like in the near future. And he was saying there is going to be like a new Earth and it's going to be like way better. And he was saying there's like cities of light and all this stuff. And he's like, I don't know exactly when. So, in the next 30 years, 50 years, 80 years, it's somewhere in this time, these things are going to be happening. But yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but he has a really, really detailed one. He had like a being that was like a guide that taught him various lessons. And what's interesting is, in his experience, the number one lesson that he was taught was authenticity. And he was like, this was surprising to me because I figured they would say love is the most important. But what he received was that you have to learn to be authentic before you can learn to authentically love. So that was like the lesson that he received. Yeah, I don't know, his was just amazing. Like, he learned lessons about prejudice and how people need to get over prejudices to move up to higher realms of existence. And he was like, I'm totally against prejudice. I'm not like that. I'm not racist. I'm not this. I'm not that. And the guy told him, you're prejudiced against prejudiced people. So you're still on the team of prejudice. You have to get over that. You have to still learn to accept and forgive and, love these people or be cool with these people. So it's interesting, but yeah, he was shown there's like all these levels of existence, and there's higher and higher levels you can move up, where the experience is more and more pleasant. It's more amazing. So, and basically it's like the advancement of your soul or of your consciousness allows you to move up. Yeah, and there's just so many. So I encourage people to watch them. There's so many on YouTube. Bunch of near-death experience channels on YouTube where they just cover a lot of these. If you just search near-death experience on YouTube, you'll find a bunch of different channels that cover these. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
How people find
so
you?
Find me at alifedesign.org or Special K Coaching on Instagram.
Cool. Thank you so much. Do you have some final thoughts, Dean?
Yeah, a few things. It's interesting. When you bring up the life review, I think I remember reading in the research that I've read on this that the life review actually happens in a minority of near-death experience cases. And there we might be able to speculate about why that is, and like what kind of person needs a life review and who doesn't, and that kind of thing. But it's interesting that it happens. It's not standard. I'm not saying anything about what that might mean. It's just really interesting to note. Yeah, I think I've said everything it's important to say at this point. People can find me at deanabbott.com, on Twitter at deanabbott, or at alifedesign.org.
Woohoo! Cool, great. How about you, Jonathan? Final thoughts, and how do people get a hold of you?
Yes, actually, when it comes to the self, the experience of self in a specific lifetime, it can get as real and powerful as you allow it to be. For example, let's say Alexander the Great experience of self was very extreme. Julius Caesar was a very extreme experience of self. Now, the yogi that is in a cave eating a mango, looking at the trees, watching the birds fly by, listening to what they're talking about, his experience of self is not as attached to the self itself. So when it comes to the how powerful is it, it just depends on your own experience. And part of the coaching, Mirna, you were mentioning about like what I can do with humans is I can give them a different perspective. And actually, as I experience more life, my style has changed as well. Because one of my main things before introducing them to their higher self now is let's just get some perspective on like what is your perspective of self? Like how attached are you to yourself? As a are you a Julius Caesar or are you a yogi with a mango or somewhere in between? From there, I can start. Um, so yeah, I will say for anybody that is extremely attached to their idea of self, they do need like a cup of perspective. Like, hey, listen, it's not a big deal. I know it's gonna take some work for you to comprehend that it's not such a big deal. But the reality of the situation is that it's the self is such a short experience, and if you make it as like the ultimate ever, like this is it, it can get you into some psychological troubles and some physiological troubles and emotional troubles. So I would definitely recommend if somebody is very attached to their idea of self and what if somebody else is going to think of me, oh, I did this mistake the last year, oh my God, I'm the most horrible human on the planet. Just take a cup of perspective and then see that it's not actually a big deal. Like, you'll be fine.
I love your cup of perspective. And, we judge ourselves harshly. We allow other people to judge us and condemn us too. And I think sometimes a near death experience is just that intersection for an amazing reset for people. So, okay, Jonathan, how do people find you?
Yes, you can find me on alivedesign.org. Also, Jonathan R. Coaching on Instagram as well.
Oh, wonderful. Good. Yes, you can find our team of coaches on alifedesign.org. My final thought is I'm remembering a story of someone on YouTube, and I'll put the link in the description. His name is Douglas Gabriel, and he was trained to be an exorcist, actually. He no longer does that work, but from his earliest memories, he was extremely clairvoyant. And when he would say the things he was seeing, people would tell him to pipe down because it didn't make sense to anybody, like you're making up stories or you're a silly little boy or something. And when he was like 5 or 6, he was raised Catholic. He was in a church, and as they were leaving the service, his mom asked him, "What's your favorite part of church?" And he said, "Oh, it's when the angels come and sing during the Eucharist." And she's like, "Don't talk like that." So, I think that people who have near-death experiences then don't know how to express them after the fact and not sound crazy. And we know in the variety of the ones that you can hear, people's experiences are not uniform. Some people have a difficult experience. Other people have a very lovely, warm experience. Some people see Jesus as they imagined Jesus. Other people don't. And so, I think there's this filter of self, as you talk about, Dean, and that self to some point transports with you wherever that is. So you still have some of that filter there. But if you have nobody believing you, the last thought is there's a team of coaches that will listen. So sometimes you just need to be seen and heard. Okay, I have one more last thing. Dolores Cannon, and I learned her a hypnosis way, BQH, but she in the 1960s started, she and her husband, he was in the military, and to earn a little extra income, he learned hypnosis, very old school 1950s, 1960s hypnosis. And people in the military, both enlisted and then also wives and family members would come, and they wanted to use hypnosis to stop smoking or lose weight. Those were the two main things. and they were reasonably effective at that. So they would take appointments into their living room, I think, and help people stop smoking and lose weight, and the word would spread around. And then they had someone come in, and she went under hypnosis and described a past life. And they had no idea what to do with that. Like, we don't even know what this is. She came back 5 more times and described 5 more past lives. She also quit smoking and lost weight. But sometimes we have this information come into our lives. What do we do with this? And of course, she went on to become the famous Dolores Cannon to help people understand these things. But it started there. So we're happy to help you wherever you've started. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to see you all next time.